I sat at my desk, my wet uniform dripping onto the linoleum floor, and navigated the clunky interface of the Pine Hollow County Register of Deeds. I had to fill out request forms. I had to upload a scan of my military ID. I had to attach the original power of attorney document I had scanned years ago, proving I had standing to request the history. Every spinning loading icon felt like it took an hour. I submitted the request. Then the waiting began. For the next 48 hours, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I went to PT. I shouted commands at my squad. I ate chow that tasted like cardboard. But my mind was entirely inside my laptop, waiting for a ping. I kept my phone off. I did not want to accidentally answer a call from Dale and let my voice betray me. I needed to know the extent of the damage before I spoke to him. On the third night at 2 o'clock in the morning, the email arrived. It was a large file. The subject line was simply Records Request 2024 to 8.99. I opened it. It was a PDF 50 pages thick. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face, and I began to read. It was like reading an autopsy report for a body that was still breathing. The first page was the warranty deed. There it was in black and white. Grantor Malene Lee. And below my name, in a handwriting I had known my entire life, the looped, shaky script of my father was the signature, Dale Lee, attorney in fact. I stared at that signature. I remembered him signing my report cards with that hand. I remembered him signing the permission slip for my first field trip. Now he had signed away my sanctuary. I scrolled down. I looked at the dates. The timeline was terrifying. The listing agreement had been signed just 6 days prior to the sale. 6 days. In the real estate market of Pine Hollow, houses usually sat for weeks. This was not a sale. It was a liquidation. It was a fire sale. I saw the buyer's name again, Erin Caldwell. I did not know her, but the name that appeared on the transaction coordination documents, the name that appeared on the expedited service fee line, was the one Dale had mentioned. Graham Rusk. His name was everywhere. He was the listing agent. He was the transaction coordinator. There was even a document where he was listed as a consultant for the buyer. In a normal transaction, that is a conflict of interest so bright it burns your retinas. Here it was just business. I kept scrolling looking for the why. Why the rush? Why the secrecy? Then I found the closing disclosure. This is the document that breaks down the money. It shows where every cent goes. It shows the mortgage payoff, the taxes, the fees, and at the bottom, it shows the cash to seller. My mortgage balance was roughly $120,000. The house had sold for $200,000. It was under market value, but it still left a significant chunk of equity. Roughly $70,000 should have been sitting there waiting for me. My eyes traced the line items. There was a wire transfer instruction wire to account ending in 4492. I froze. I knew that account number. That was the joint checking account Dale used for household expenses, the account I sometimes transferred money into to help with bills. But there was a second line item, a disbursement to creditor that took up the majority of the remaining cash. Payable to T. Lee Holdings, $40,000. I stopped breathing. T. Lee Trent. My brother did not have a holding company. He did not have a business. He had a gambling addiction and a talent for debt. I looked at the numbers again. They had split my life up. Dale took a slice, presumably to cover his own debts, or to feel like he had earned his commission for the betrayal. But the bulk of it, the equity I had sweated and bled for, had been funneled directly to Trent under the guise of a creditor payoff. They had laundered the sale of my home to pay off my brother's mistakes. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like hypothermia. They had not just sold a building. They had conspired. This was premeditated. The documents showed a flurry of activity emails regarding rushing the title, requests to waive the cooling-off period. They were terrified I would come home early. They were racing against my deployment schedule. I stood up and paced the small room. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to confirm it before I made my move. I could not call for my number. If Dale saw my name, he might not answer, or he might have a script ready. I needed to catch him off balance. I walked down the hall to the common area where there was a payphone that nobody used anymore, but I didn't have coins. Instead, I went back to my room and downloaded a calling app that generated a random local number, a burner line. I dialed my father's landline. It was mid-afternoon in Tennessee. He would be sitting in his recliner watching the game shows. The phone rang twice. Hello? Dale's voice was cheerful, relaxed. It was the voice of a man who had no cares in the world, a man who had just paid off his debts with someone else's money. I did not say anything for a moment. I just listened to the background noise, the familiar hum of the refrigerator, the sound of the TV, the sounds of my home. "Who is this?" Dale asked, sounding slightly annoyed, but still casual. "Dad," I said. The silence on the other end was immediate. It was not a pause. It was a vacuum. I could hear his breath hitch. "Maddie," his voice squeaked. He sounded like a child caught with his hand in the jar. "Why are you calling from this number? Is everything okay?" He was pretending. He was doing the concerned father routine. It made me want to vomit. "I am fine," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly level. "I am just doing a final check on my paperwork before I fly out." "Oh, right. Good." He cleared his throat. "When are you coming back exactly?" Trent and I were thinking maybe we could pick you up. He wanted to control the arrival. He wanted to intercept me before I got to the house. I ignored the question. I looked at the PDF open on my screen, glowing in the dark room. I looked at the signature on the deed. "Dad," I asked, dropping the pretense. "Is there anything you want to tell me about what he asked?" His voice went up a pitch. It was the same tone he used when I was 10, and he broke my mother's favorite vase and blamed the cat about the house. I said another silence. This one was heavy, thick with panic. I could almost hear his brain spinning, trying to find a lie that would fit. "The house is fine, Maddie," he stammered. "It is. The roof is good. Trent mowed the lawn. Everything is waiting for you. Lies, pure, unadulterated lies. He was standing in a house he had already sold, telling me it was waiting for me. He was gaslighting me from 7,000 miles away." I closed my eyes. That was it. That was the confirmation. There was no misunderstanding. There was no emergency he was trying to explain. There was only deceit. "Did you sell my house, Dad?" I asked. The question hung there. I waited. I wanted him to say it. I wanted him to have the courage to admit what he had done. But all I heard was breathing. Shallow, rapid breathing. I did not wait for him to construct an excuse. I did not wait for him to blame Trent, or the economy, or the pressure. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply pressed the red button on the screen. The call ended. I sat there for 1 minute listening to the rain in Okinawa. The connection was broken, but the path was clear. I opened a new tab on my browser. I went to the airline website. My original flight was scheduled for 4 days from now. That was too long. That gave them time to move the money. That gave them time to disappear. I booked a new ticket one way, departing in 6 hours. It cost me $1,000 in change fees, eating into the last of my savings. But I did not care. I did not send a text. I did not email. I wanted them to think they had weathered the storm. I wanted Dale to put the phone down and tell Trent. "She suspects something, but she is still in Japan. We have time." I wanted them to relax. I wanted them to open those beers on the porch. I packed my bag. I folded my uniforms with precision. I took the file, the 50 pages of evidence, and I saved it to a thumb drive, then emailed a copy to Mr. Henderson and another copy to a cloud account they could never access. I was coming home, but I wasn't coming home to sleep. I walked out of the barracks and into the rainy night, dragging my bag behind me. The flight would be 14 hours of hell, but that was fine. I needed the time to memorize every name, every date, and every dollar amount on those documents. By the time I stepped onto that porch, I would not just be Malene Lee, the daughter. I would be the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner of their little scheme. And they would not see me coming until my shadow fell over their celebration. The confrontation on the porch had reached a stalemate. I had dropped the bomb you sold your own funeral plots and walked away. But I hadn't gone far. I had just moved to the tactical position of the sidewalk, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between us. Dale was still clutching the railing, his face a mask of confusion and lingering defiance. Trent, however, had moved from smugness to aggression. He stood up, crushing his beer can. "You cannot just say that and walk off," Trent shouted, his voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. "You are just jealous because we made a smart move and you were not here to take the credit." I turned around slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The rage I felt was so condensed it felt heavy in my chest, like a lead vest. "Who notarized it?" I asked. The question caught them off guard. Trent blinked. "What the deed?" I clarified, stepping back toward the bottom of the porch stairs, invading their space again. "A deed requires a notary public to witness the signature." "Dad signed for me. Who witnessed it? Was it Mrs. Gable down at the bank? Was it the clerk at the post office?" Dale shifted his weight, looking at his shoes. "It was handled. It was part of the package." "Part of the package," I repeated. "A mobile notary. Someone who came to the house. Graham took care of it." Trent snapped. "Why do you care about the paperwork? It is done. The money is in the bank. You're just trying to find problems because you are miserable." "Who is the legal representative?" I pressed. "Which title company held the escrow?" Dale waved a hand dismissively. "It was all streamlined. Graham said we didn't need to bloat the cost with a bunch of lawyers. It was a direct family-facilitated transfer." Very modern. My stomach churned. Direct family-facilitated transfer. That wasn't a legal term. That was gibberish designed to hide a crime. Before I could tear that logic apart, the front door of the house, my front door opened. The sound of the latch clicking was like a gunshot. Dale jumped. Trent spun around. A woman stepped out. She looked to be about my age, maybe a few years older. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that said Nashville Music City. Her hair was in a messy bun, and she was holding a ceramic mug of tea. She looked tired, normal, and completely out of place in the middle of this family war zone. This was Erin Caldwell, the grantee. She looked at Dale, then at Trent, and finally her eyes landed on me. She saw the duffel bag. She saw the uniform boots I was still wearing. She saw the tension vibrating in the air. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I heard shouting. Dale immediately put on a fake jovial smile that was painful to watch. "Oh, hey, Erin." "Oh no, everything is fine. Just a little family reunion. My daughter Malene, she just got back from overseas. She is a little overwrought, jet lag, you know. He was trying to dismiss me. He was trying to paint me as the hysterical, emotional soldier who just needed a nap. I did not let him. I looked directly at Erin. I didn't glare. I didn't scowl. I looked at her with a professional appraisal of someone assessing a civilian in a combat zone. "I am Malene Lee," I said, my voice calm and clear. "And I am the owner of this house." Erin's face palled. She tightened her grip on the mug. "Excuse me," she said, looking back at Dale. "You told me she knew. You said she was relocating permanently to Japan and wanted to liquidate." Dale laughed. A nervous hacking sound. "She does. She did. She is just having cold feet. Sentimental value, right, sweetie?" I stepped up onto the porch again. Dale tried to block me, but I moved around him with a fluid sigh deep that left him stumbling. I stood 3 feet from Erin. I did not know this house was for sale until 3 days ago. I told her, "I did not sign the deed. I did not authorize the sale, and I am certainly not relocating to Japan." Erin looked terrified. She looked from me to Dale, and the realization began to dawn on her. She wasn't a villain. She wasn't a shark. She was just a woman who thought she had bought a home. "If we have the keys," she stammered. "We moved in yesterday. My husband is at work. We paid cash. How long did the process take?" I asked gently. Erin swallowed hard. 4 days from the viewing to the closing. "And who handled the paperwork?" "Mr. Rusk. Graham. Rusk." I nodded. And did you have your own lawyer review the title? Did you have a real estate attorney look at the power of attorney document? Erin shook her head. Graham said it wasn't necessary. He said since it was an expedited family sale, bringing in lawyers would just slow down the emergency funding your father needed. He said he was doing us a favor by cutting out the closing costs. I felt a pain of sympathy for her. They had played her just as hard as they had played me. They used Dale's emergency to guilt her into rushing, and they used the cost-saving lie to keep her from getting legal advice. "Listen to me, Erin," I said, lowering my voice so only she could hear, ignoring Trent's sputtered protest behind me. "I am not here to throw your furniture on the street today. I am not here to scream at you." I reached into the side pocket of my duffel bag and pulled out a folded manila envelope. Inside were copies of the documents I had pulled from the registry, the fake timeline, the weird disbursement of funds, the irregularities Mr. Henderson had highlighted. I held it out to her. "If this transaction has points of failure, and it has many, then you are not the owner. You are a victim of fraud, just like me." She hesitated, then took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. "What does this mean?" she whispered. "It means you need a lawyer," I said. "Not Graham Rusk, not anyone Graham Rusk recommends. You need a real independent real estate attorney tonight." Dale lunged forward. "Do not listen to her. She is just trying to scare you. The deal is done. The papers are filed." I turned on my heel and faced my father and brother. The sympathy vanished. The cold rage returned. "You think the papers are filed?" I asked Dale. "You think because you signed Dale Lee on a dotted line, it is over?" "It is over," Trent yelled. "We have the money. You cannot undo it." I looked at Trent. He looked so pathetic in his triumph. He thought money was the only thing that mattered. He didn't understand the law. He didn't understand that a transaction built on fraud is not a transaction. It is a crime scene. But there was something else. Something Mr. Henderson had found at the very end of our meeting, a detail about the original deed from when I bought the house 5 years ago. A clause I had insisted on because I was young, single, and paranoid about liability. I looked at them both. Then back at Erin, who was clutching the envelope like a shield. "You are right about one thing, Dad," I said. "You sold the house. You took the money." I picked up my bag. "But you made a mistake. A big one." "What mistake?" Dale asked, his voice trembling. I smiled that same unnerving smile. "You checked the power of attorney. You checked the bank accounts, but you never checked the original title structure of this property." I leaned in, whispering the final blow. "This house isn't just under my name, Dad. It is held in a living trust, the Malene Lee Revocable Trust, and the power of attorney you have. It grants you authority over Malene Lee, the individual. It does not grant you authority over the trust." Dale's eyes went wide. He didn't understand the legal nuance, but he understood the tone. "You sold something you never had the keys to," I said. "And that house, it has been legally locked the entire time." I turned and walked down the steps, leaving them in stunned silence. Erin was dialing her phone before I even reached the street. Dale looked like he was about to faint. Trent just stood there, his mouth open, the crushed beer can dripping onto his shoe. I walked toward the motel on the edge of town. I had nowhere to sleep, but I had never felt more awake. The first shot had been fired. Now I just had to watch them bleed. The Highwayman Motel was located 3 miles from the exit ramp of Interstate 40, wedged between a truck stop and a Waffle House that looked like it had survived a minor bombing campaign. The room cost $65 a night. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial lemon cleaner, a scent that was becoming depressingly familiar to me. I threw my duffel bag on the floor and cleared the small circular table by the window. I did not turn on the television. I did not unpack my clothes. Instead, I unpacked the war. I laid out the documents I had printed at the base in Okinawa, arranging them in a chronological grid. The deed, the closing disclosure, the power of attorney, the emails. It was a paper map of my own destruction. My phone had been buzzing in my pocket for the last hour, vibrating against my thigh like a nervous tick. I finally sat down on the edge of the sagging mattress and checked the notifications. There were 4 missed calls from Dale, 3 from Trent, and 2 voicemails. I pressed play on the speakerphone, setting the device on the table amidst the paperwork. "Maddie, pick up the phone." Dale's voice crackled. He sounded breathless, his tone oscillating between anger and panic. "You cannot just say things like that to Erin and walk away. She is freaking out. She is threatening to call her bank. You are going to ruin us." "Malene, do you hear me? If this deal unwinds, the money is already committed. You need to come back here and sign a waiver or something. Just call me. We are family." Click. I stared at the phone. Not once did he ask where I was staying. Not once did he ask if I had eaten or if I was safe or how it felt to come home from a deployment to find strangers in my kitchen. His only concern was the money that was already committed. I played the next one. It was Trent. "You think you are so smart," Trent sneered, his voice slurred, likely from the beer he had been nursing on the porch. "The trust thing. Graham says it is a loophole. We can fix it. You are just trying to embarrass Dad. You are selfish, Maddie. Always have been. You get the big military paycheck and you leave us here to rot. Call Dad back before he has a heart attack." I deleted the messages. I felt a strange hollowness in my chest, a void where my affection for them used to be. They were not my family anymore. They were hostile combatants. Then a text message popped up. It was from a number I did not recognize, but the preview text made me sit up straighter. "It is Aaron." "Miles and I just left Avery Pike's office. He is a real estate litigator. He says, 'If what you showed me is true, we are in serious trouble. We want to help. Tell us what you need.'" I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Erin was not the enemy. She was the flank security. I typed back, "Do not sign anything Graham sends you. Do not talk to my father. I am filing a police report in the morning. I will need you to make a statement." Her reply was instant. "We are in." I slept for 4 hours, a fitful, shallow sleep where I dreamt I was back in the barracks, but the walls were made of glass and everyone outside was selling my furniture. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I walked into the Pine Hollow Police Precinct. It was a brick building that smelled of coffee and old paper. I approached the front desk and asked to speak to a detective regarding real estate fraud and grand larceny. The officer at the desk looked at my military ID, looked at my face, and buzzed me through. Detective Lena Hart was a woman who looked like she did not have time for nonsense. She was in her late 40s with hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that scanned me with the precision of a laser reader. Her desk was a mountain of files, but she cleared a space when I sat down. "Start from the beginning," she said, clicking a pen. I laid it out. The deployment, the power of attorney meant for maintenance, the lack of communication, the sale, the diversion of funds to Trent, the trust issue. She took notes, her face impassive. It sounded like a civil dispute, the kind of messy family drama cops hate getting involved in. I could see it in her eyes. She was getting ready to tell me to get a lawyer and go to civil court. Then I played my ace. I was in Okinawa. "Detective, I said I was on active duty orders. This wasn't just a misuse of a document. They liquidated the primary residence of a deployed service member." Hart stopped writing. She looked up. "You were deployed?" she asked. "Under the Service Members Civil Relief Act?" "Yes," I said. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The temperature dropped. The civil dispute label vanished, replaced by something much more serious. "And who was the agent?" she asked, her voice sharper. "Graham Rusk," I said. Hart's pen froze in midair. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. It wasn't a good kind of recognition. It was the look a cop gives when you mention a name they have written on a whiteboard too many times. "Rusk," she muttered almost to herself. "You know him?" I asked. Hart leaned back in her chair, tapping the pen against her chin. "I have heard the name," she said carefully. "We have had complaints, usually from the elderly, usually about fast cash offers that turn into nightmares, but nothing that ever stuck. He is good at staying in the gray areas. He uses third-party LLCs and independent contractors." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. But selling a soldier's house while she is overseas, that is not a gray area. Ms. Lee, that is a felony. And if he knew you were deployed, he knew. I said, my father told him. The timeline proves they were rushing to beat my return date. Hart picked up her phone. I'm going to open a file. This is not just a report anymore. It is an investigation. I want you to send me everything you have, every email, every text. And I need to talk to this buyer, Mrs. Caldwell. She is cooperating. I said, good. Hart stood up. Stay in town. Keep your phone on and do not, I repeat, do not confront Rusk yourself. If he is doing what I think he is doing, he is not working alone. I left the station feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. The gears were turning. But as I drove back to the motel, my mind kept snagging on something Hart had said. He is good at staying in the gray areas. I went back to my room and opened the laptop again. I needed to find the gray area. I started digging into the financial breakdown again. I had looked at the closing disclosure, but I hadn't looked closely at the preliminary title work. I pulled up the title commitment document from the package Mr. Henderson had helped me request. I scanned the list of liens against the property. There was my original mortgage standard, but there was something else, a second lien. Lien holder, Rapid Bridge Capital LLC. Amount $35,000. Date recorded. September 12th. September 12th. That was 3 weeks before the sale closed. That was 2 weeks before Dale sent me the text telling me to call him. My heart started to pound. This wasn't part of the sale. This was a loan taken out against the house before they sold it. They had used the power of attorney to take out a high-interest short-term bridge loan on my equity, pocketed that cash, and then sold the house to pay off the loan and get the rest of the money. It was a double tap. They had bled the house dry before they even handed over the keys. I checked the disbursement for Rapid Bridge Capital. The address for the lender was a suite in a strip mall in a town 40 minutes away. I grabbed my phone and texted Dale. I didn't bother with pleasantries. Did you take out a loan against the house before you sold it? I watched the screen. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. He was typing. He was deleting. He was panicking. Finally, the response came. We needed operating capital to fix the place up for the sale. It was for repairs. Repairs. The house was in perfect condition when I left, and Erin had said she bought it as is. There were no repairs. Show me the receipts, I texted back. Silence. The $35,000 hadn't gone to repairs. It had gone into their pockets or Trent's pockets or somewhere else. Just then, a message came through from Erin. It was a picture of a crumpled piece of paper. Graham gave me this at the closing. She wrote, he said it was a receipt for the mobile notary service he used to get your signature verified remotely. I found it in the bottom of the welcome packet. I zoomed in on the photo. It was a generic invoice from a company called Verified Mobile Signatures. The address was listed as 1402 Oak Creek Drive, Suite B, Nashville. I opened a map tab on my browser. I typed in the address. The satellite view loaded. It wasn't an office building. It wasn't a business park. It was a Self-S storage facility. I stared at the screen. A Self-S storage unit. The official notary service that had validated my signature while I was 7,000 meters away was operating out of a metal box filled with old mattresses and Christmas decorations. This wasn't just Dale being desperate. This wasn't just Trent being greedy. Dale didn't know how to set up a shell company for a notary. Trent wasn't smart enough to structure a bridge loan through a shell LLC like Rapid Bridge Capital. I looked at the names again. Rapid Bridge Capital Verified Mobile Signatures. Graham Rusk. The pattern emerged like a hidden image in a puzzle. These weren't independent mistakes. These were tools. My father and brother thought they were the ones pulling the strings. They thought they had used Graham Rusk to solve their problem. But as I looked at the fake address and the predatory loan, the terrifying reality hit me. Dale and Trent weren't the masterminds. They were the bait. Graham Rusk hadn't just helped them sell a house. He had handed them a loaded gun, pointed it at my head, and told them it was a water pistol. He had built a system to strip equity from families in crisis, using their own dysfunction as the cover. I wasn't just fighting my family anymore. I was standing on the edge of a criminal enterprise that used fathers and brothers as disposable pawns. And I was the only one who saw the strings. The fluorescent lights of the precinct interrogation room hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. I was not being interrogated, but Detective Lena Hart had commandeered the room because it was the only quiet place in the station. Ideally, a strategy meeting happens in a war room with maps and satellite imagery. Here, we had a metal table, a few styrofoam cups of lukewarm coffee, and a growing mountain of evidence that smelled like ink and betrayal. Hart slid a manila folder across the table toward me. Her face was grim, the lines around her eyes deeper than they had been yesterday. "We pulled the notary logs," she said, her voice dry. "Or rather, we tried to." I opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of the deed's signature page. The notary stamp was a smudge of blue ink, but the name was legible. Patricia Vance. "Commission expires 2025. I looked up at Hart. "Does she exist?" "Oh, she exists," Hart said, leaning back and crossing her arms. "But she has been in a memory care facility in Chattanooga for the last 18 months. She surrendered her commission 2 years ago. We called her son. He said her stamp went missing from her home office right before they moved her." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was not just a fake signature, it was identity theft of an elderly woman. They were using a ghost to validate their crimes. "So the notarization is void." I said it is worse than void. Hart corrected. "It is a fabrication. And since a deed cannot be recorded without a valid notary acknowledgement, the entire recording is fraudulent. But to prove that in a way that sticks, we need to link the physical act of stamping that document to Graham Rusk." She tapped the table with her index finger. "We need the video. I sent a warrant to that storage facility you found. The one listed as the mobile notary address. We are looking for footage of Rusk, your father or your brother, entering or exiting around the date of the signing." "My father," I said, the word tasting like ash. "You think he knew the notary was fake?" Hart looked at me with a pity that I hated. "Malene, your father signed the deed. He stood in a room or a storage unit and watched someone who was not Patricia Vance stamp that paper. Either he is the most gullible man in Tennessee, or he didn't care who was holding the stamp as long as the check cleared." I stared at the fake stamp. I wanted to believe he was just stupid. I really did. But stupidity has limits. Greed does not. I left the station and drove straight to the office of Noah Clean.